maybe we should start out just with a little bit of your life story. I've been following you on YouTube since maybe the early 2000 teens. And I don't remember if the first I heard of you was Mike Johnston saying on a podcast, if he ever has a jazz question, he goes to you, or if I discovered you before that ambiently, but I'd love to hear just a little bit about your journey and like how you ended up in the space.
Yeah, sure. Let's see, it all started way back when I went to William Patterson and lived out in New Jersey and New York for a little while. And then September 11th happened and I came back home to Sacramento and with full intentions of moving back to New York and doing all that. But it got really weird because I was able to make a living as a musician here and I just stayed. And I was actually teaching with Mike Johnston at a place called the Drum Lab. When he opened it up in 2006 or 2005, we helped assemble the drums, and we had shed sessions with like Eric Moore and all sorts of crazy people over at the old Drum Lab. And Mike made a video how to play double bass with one foot, and it got 100,000 views in a month. And he was like, I see a money-making opportunity here. And it was very early on in YouTube. And I was like, oh, if Mike's doing it, maybe I should do it too. So I put up a camera and recorded some bossa nova videos in a horribly untreated room in my house and a couple other little jazz videos. And, that was, oh gosh, almost 20 years ago now. That was like 2006. So I think that was when my first video went up. And then it's just been one of those things that I never really curated much, I love YouTube and I love, things, the opportunity and all the stuff that's on there, but I've always been really focused on my own personal, just regular career, playing career and teaching career. And so like, I come into YouTube on and off. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not really like a very consistent YouTuber like you are. And I actually remember when you started going really consistent, I was like, oh shoot, Nate's taking off. I know what he's doing, which is really cool. I loved it. And funny thing too is that I started following you when you had the Shed Science YouTube channel, I believe.
Oh wow, way back.
Yeah, I saw you on Shed Science and you were playing with a friend of mine at the time, Evan, the saxophone player on that.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh shoot.
Yeah, I just ran into him on Instagram the other day. Like I think he still lives in New York. I haven't hung with him in like 9 years. It's a travesty. I should get together with him.
Yeah, he's great. We were playing at sessions in San Francisco a bit together, and so it's kind of like, hey, I'm gonna play more in San Francisco, and then I realized the gigs didn't pay anymore, and it was way more of a hassle than it was anything. So I kind of like backed off from the Bay Area scene, but I just started doing that, and now I kind of put YouTube videos out here and there, and Instagram videos, and here we are.
Yeah, it's interesting how most of the brand name cities are actually some of the worst places to make money playing live, with the possible exception of Nashville. Nashville seems to be like the one scene where it's a scene and you can also make money playing. But I gather you're making much more of a performance career in Sacramento than you would have if you'd either stayed in New York or been in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I think so. I think I have a family now, so I'm actually kind of cutting back on a lot of that stuff. But I get to play with pop symphonies, and there have been famous, well-known jazz musicians in the area that lived here, and it's been really great to get to play with them when they come around. It's nice, I hate to say the big fish in the small pond sort of thing, but generally speaking, I'll get some cool calls from people when they come through town, and it's a lot of fun to be able to play music at a high level still and not have to worry about it. I mean, I do miss the struggle of the city. I mean, living in New Jersey, I had to pay, the toll was $6 back then. It was $6 and then whatever my parking ticket was going to be, plus all the time it took to find a parking spot it turned out not to be legal. And then, you pay a $75 gig and you end up paying $120 in fines. So I kind of miss that, but.
That literally happened to me.
Right? That's the New York story right there. So, but yeah, it's nice to not have to deal with a lot of that out here, and still be able to play great music. So,
how would you say you divide your time between sort of pure traditional jazz and other genres? Do you consider yourself a polymath, or do you consider yourself primarily jazz focused?
I'd say at this point, mostly jazz focused. When I lived back east too, I played in a band called Spiraling, which is a band that Paul Wells was in after me, and Ari Honig was in right before me. It was with this great keyboard player. It was his band. His name is Tom Brislin, and he's currently the keyboard player for Kansas. At the time, he was the keyboard player for Meatloaf. And so we would kind of go around and we'd do a lot of little tours, and we played at Bowery Ballroom and Irving Plaza, places like that. And after I left, they were touring and got fairly successful. But yeah, so that was probably after I left. I was in another band called Nova Social in New York, and then I moved back out here and I played in one like shoegazer band for a little while in San Francisco, and was just kind of tired of that scene, so I kind of gave it up and just started playing more big band and jazz and all of that. In fact, little known fact probably about me is that I actually took lessons with David Garibaldi from the time I was 14 to 17. I met him at a clinic and I said, "Hi, Mr. Garibaldi, can I take lessons from you?" Not even knowing where he lived or any of that stuff. And he wrote his phone number on the back of a poster, a Yamaha Maple Custom poster. And I called him up the next day and he answered the phone, and once a month I was taking lessons from him for a long time, and it was a lot of fun and really cool. So I was definitely used to have a lot more opportunities in styles outside of jazz, but I would say now it's mostly jazz and big band and, symphony pops and things like that.
There's a lot we could go into about teachers, and maybe we'll have time, but I also want to touch on teaching and obviously the issue at hand, the impetus for our call, which is heel up versus heel down. And I wonder if we could sort of sidestep into that by my asking, have you always played heel down, and do you think you'd still play heel down if you were doing more multi-genre stuff and not exclusively jazz?
Yeah. No, I was not always heel down. In fact, when I was going back to the lessons with David Garibaldi, and in the mid-90s, early mid-90s, I sat on the floor like Vinnie Colaiuta, the stool all the way on the ground, knees up to your chin and all that stuff, and the ride cymbal way up here that you had to reach for. So yeah, I definitely was burying the beater. I had the biggest hole in the front of my bass drum just because any resonance was too much. And, that was the sound, and that's how we did it back then, right? So that was where I started. And then I would say as I progressed and learned more about jazz and was at probably William Patterson and stuff, and I started putting a solid front bass drum on, I couldn't bury the beater anymore without the flutter, right? So I was like, this is annoying. I had to figure out a technique to not do that. And eventually I don't remember when I switched to heel down, but it had to be in the William Patterson years in the practice rooms. And eventually I was like, wow, I can pretty much do what I need to do with this. To that effect, when I was playing with the rock bands during that same time, I was definitely still burying the beater. I put on bass drums with holes in the head, and I would hit really hard. And I was trying to tour. I was touring with Spiraling, and my kit was an 18-12-14 bop kit, and at the Bowery Ballroom that was fine because it was all mic'd up, and anytime we were playing with some big names, we were always really well mic'd. And then every once in a while we'd play something that was unmic'd, and my bass drum would just get lost. The 18s just weren't doing it. So even hitting it as hard as I possibly could. So I would think that that's about the last time I really was playing heel up. I was playing in some blues bands and stuff around here as well. In the recent years, I kind of stopped doing that, and I found that I would play a hybrid of heel up and heel down, where the heel was kind of just a little bit above the plate, and I would hit the bass drum so that the beater could come off the bass drum and not be buried into it, and that was it. And then all the resting, my heel was always down, and yeah. But most of the time, heel down.
Interesting. Well, I've had almost exactly the reciprocal journey. So most of my life I played heel down, including in high school when I was in some garage bands. I didn't really start playing jazz seriously until late high school and college. So obviously in college, when you're playing in jazz settings, heel down works really well. And it also feels very intuitive because it's sort of the primary way we tap our feet. And it wasn't, so I went to music college in the early 2000s, and I graduated in 2003. And it wasn't until about 2010, 2011 that I was still playing jazz. I was still gigging in jazz, but I was also starting to dip back into the other genres. In particular, we'll call it Berkeley chops thing, which was starting to blow up. Speaking of Mike Sheds and Eric Moore and Aaron Spears and Thomas Pridgeon and all those guys. Thomas Pridgeon, another Garibaldi student, incidentally. The fingerprint of Garibaldi, the shadow of Garibaldi looms large. But and then I was also starting to check out Nate Wood and get really into knee body and that sort of fusion. And I think maybe I kind of hit a breaking point where I felt like I wanted to produce more of a dynamic range, and I wanted to bring more of my leg weight to bear. And I felt like I was burning out and getting shin splints when I was trying to do it heel down. So I actually remember the day I was just like, I made a clean break, and it felt really, really awkward at first. It felt like I was trying to balance on my toes, and I would tip over, and then little by little it got more and more refined, etc. So one reason I thought it would be cool to have this convo is just because I like to look for synthesis. Like it's very easy to say things are all this way or all that way, and that's very rarely the case in real life. It's usually about trade-offs and what you're trying to optimize for. And I feel like in my own life, the thing that's the biggest sort of bellwether for this was like the nutrition debate in the early 2000 or early 20 teens, where it was like paleo or keto versus calories in, calories out. And you had the paleo keto guys on one side and one set of podcasts, and then the calories in, calories out guys. And it's not until like the last few years that those two threads have kind of been reconciled. And that always absolutely drove me batty. So that's why I look for synthesis. And I knew as soon as I saw your video, I was like, ooh, this is interesting. Okay, let's talk about this. But I also was picturing the students that were going to come to me saying, hang on, Tim Metz says play heel down. You say play heel up, and then my needing to explain like, well, it depends on what you're going for. There are upsides and downsides to each. And yeah, that's why I thought it would just be a much better opportunity for us to just hop on. So to turn this into a question, what did you feel like were the biggest things you were missing out on before you switched to heel down? And what do you feel like you were able to gain as a result of changing your technique?
Right. So to speak to kind of the last thing first, I always like to say in my teaching that if you have a teacher that says that this is the only way to do something, find a different teacher. And I never will tell my students that heel up is the only way to do this or heel down is the only way to do that. I always say, here are some options for you. Find what works best for you. And that's, I think that that's what a teacher really needs to do. Like, we're here to inspire and get people to reach places that they never thought they could reach. And so that's my main impetus here with teaching. But so to that effect, what your other question, the first thing was the bass drum resonance. When I put a solid front head on my bass drum for the first time. I mean, my first real drum set was a Pearl Export from the 80s. And I don't know if you remember those, but they came with a big, huge, like 15-inch circle right out of the middle of that 22-inch bass drum that you stuffed then with full of blankets and pillows. And, and so like there was no resonance out of the drum. It wasn't something that you wanted. And then all of a sudden, I think, I can't remember what it was, but I'm pretty sure I saw like a DW drum set that had, like a solid front head with the holes around it. And I played one of those and I was like, I can't play this drum. What is this, And eventually, playing more jazz, my foot was very loud at that time. Like I was playing very heavily. Like bass drum couldn't be loud enough when I was playing. And just in that styles, in funk and in like more rock styles, it's like you just can't have a loud enough bass drum. So I was able to hit it really hard and never really had any issues. And then all of a sudden, my balance, when I was focusing more on traditional jazz playing, the balance of my kit was off. And a lot of that was due to, I never really feathered before that either. So I got to school and I remember Rufus Reed kind of like, I'm sorry, my feet are going to hurt from dropping names a little bit here, but Rufus kind of looked over at me once when we were in a combo, and he's like, looks at my foot, and he's like, Mr. Metz, why aren't you feathering? I was like, well, Weckl doesn't feather, or something stupid like that, and he's like, you need to feather the bass drum. I was like, yes, sir. And so I started feathering right there, and I started working on it, and I couldn't get it to be quiet enough, heel up. And so my balance fell off. And then with the solid front head of the 18-inch bass drum, it just made it so the logical choice for me was to feather heel down, and they gave me better balance because I was able to keep my balance on the heels of my feet. And, it just really made it so that I could play with a larger dynamic range. Now, that to be saying, like, if I really still to this day want to hit the bass drum hard, I go heel up and give it the full weight of my leg, but I don't play an entire concert like that, So I would say that it was really from learning how to feather, learning what the sound was, what the balance of the sound was for the drum set, for jazz drums in particular, and solid front bass drum heads, and being annoyed with that flutter that you get from heel down or heel up, pressing the beater into the bass drum. So that was pretty much it.
Yeah, I have a bunch of follow-ups, and I definitely want to get into setup and sort of common questions. But one side note is that only recently did I get hip to the idea of not burying the kick pedal. And I don't remember whether it was Elich or somebody else, but basically in the space of about 3 years, I've been bounce pilled, if you will, meaning I feel like, and you just said teachers shouldn't use absolutes. In my humble opinion, I feel like drummers will be more versatile and have a bigger toolkit. Notice how I'm mitigating all this from an absolute. If they're able to play off of the kick drum and they do what they need to do with technique and setup to be able to do that without tension. Because I think you're exactly right. It feels like in the early 2000s, the aesthetic shifted from these big, heavily muffled kick drums where it would just sound sick if you planted the beater. That was the sound, to more high-tuned sort of fusion tunings. I think about people like Ron Bruner, where, yeah, you can't bury the kick in the same way without getting a buzz or a ghost note or anything like that. So I'll put that out front. My major question would be to jump into sort of setup and facilitating heel down. What were the biggest things that needed to change with your setup to facilitate your playing heel down without tension, if there were any?
The biggest one is, it's always this one, and I start with my students that want to learn heel down. It's seating position, right? I think you have to sit further back so that your weight can be a little bit more on your heels than it would be otherwise. Like if you're playing heel up, I want to bring my the balls of my feet more directly in line with my knees so that I have that balance, right? So seating position is number one. If you sit the same way, heel down, as you sit heel up, you're going to get those shin splints here. It's just impossible for you to move that muscle in the front of your leg. So I'm about where my heel's down below my knee, maybe just even out just a little bit further depending on space. And, that way it allows me to play with relative ease and not a lot of discomfort. Like if I'm playing multiple repetitive like 16th note patterns and things like that, which I don't do much, but if I did, then I'd really probably have to adjust technique. I was at a Weckl clinic, second time Weckl's brought up, but I was at a Weckl clinic once where I actually asked him a question about how his technique transformed from like the back to basics days to to now, essentially. And, he was talking about how he realized that there isn't just one technique. He was very rigid in his playing at first, at least that's what he said. He was more rigid and didn't adjust techniques. Then he started studying Buddy Rich, and he noticed that with Buddy Rich, when he was playing the super fast singles, he would play and adjust his technique and flow and breathe in the middle of it. And so it wasn't one technique that was allowing Buddy Rich to have the speed and the flow. It was multiple techniques. And with those multiple techniques, that allows Buddy Rich to have the speed. And when Weckl started incorporating that, then, he found the light bulb, it's somewhere in there. And so for me, like with the bass drum technique, it's the same thing. Like, mostly heel down, but if I have to play repetitive notes, then I might move my leg a little bit and, adjust so that I release that tension that's in there.
What about seat height? What about throne height? Did you feel like, do you feel like you need to sit lower when you're playing heel down, or were you always sort of sitting in a range that would facilitate that?
It's a great question. I'm still experimenting with it. Seat height's an important thing for me. I'm relatively tall, and a lot of drum hardware doesn't go high enough for me. So I've actually started sitting lower, and that's partially due to the cameras back here because you can't see it, but there's a microphone like right here. And there's two stereo pairs that are right there, and I keep them just out of frame, which means that I have to sit a little bit lower so my head's in frame. So part of my seating height, I found that I actually reverted to sitting a lot lower than I used to. I used to sit relatively high, but now I'm about at a place where my thighs are level. They're not going up like this, and my knees, aren't up this high, and they're not down. It's pretty much even, and it's been actually really comfortable because then I can actually get my snare drum and my tom up high enough, not Kenny Washington high, but high enough to where I can play and have the facility that I'm looking for on the drums. So
yeah, the feathering thing is interesting too. I recently got into practicing feathering more again, partly as a result of Greg Hutchinson's Instagram video, which I think has since been deleted, which is weird. I wish he had kept it up. But yeah, slight detour. What were your favorite ways to practice feathering? Because the biggest challenge for me with it was always transitioning from feathering to hitting bass drum accents. It's easy enough to feather if you're only playing accents with the left hand. Was there anything in particular you practiced to make that easier?
No. I don't remember, honestly, going back to those days, like what I did that was differently. I think it was... I was kind of in a lucky state in my life because I remember there were a couple of like technique things that my teachers would point out and I would just do. And as a teacher, I'm starting to realize that that's kind of a rare thing, And I don't know if I did it well or did it right, but I remember like one time one of my teachers corrected my palm. All he had to do, like I was playing traditional grip, like a little bit lower like this, and not arm angle excluded, but like the palm angle, right? So I was playing it with more of a flat palm down. And then he said, Tony Williams played like this. And I said, okay, done. and that was literally the last conversation we ever had about it. And I just kind of went in the practice room and just watched my left hand and it was over. And so with the heel down, like feathering technique, I knew that I had to get a sound. Like I knew that volume wasn't a problem for the accented notes when I was practicing. And so I knew that I had to get the lower volume more happening. And so I was really just practicing time a lot. And then as soon as I would have to play some sort of like accent with my right foot, I would just play it and not worry about how quickly I had to get back to the feathering, if that makes sense. A lot of times like playing accents with your left foot, there's something that I actually still practice, which is playing, quarter notes and then playing all the upbeats with my left foot and keeping the feathering going with my right foot. And that's still difficult. And what I've found that I was doing before I even was conscious of that as much is when I kept the sound, the way that I kept the low end sound kind of happening was I would play the accented notes with my left foot, also with my right foot, just really quiet. So I played like the upbeats with my right foot and the left foot at the same time. So it kind of had the same effect, but it wasn't quite the same boom-chick, boom-chick, boom-chick thing that it would have been otherwise. And so that's kind of why I'm even still today, like just trying to work on getting the hi-hat, comping happening with the bass drum playing quarter note feathering, so.
Yeah, and I feel like I should know this from watching your videos, but I'm ashamed to admit I can't remember. Do you play heel down with the hats as well?
No, I actually play heel up with the hats most of the time. I find, so for me, that's more of it's a feel question, because heel down with the hi-hats feels lazy to me, and it feels like the beat gets behind the beat. Heel up, you feel like you're on top of the beat, you're pushing things forward. So I am 96% heel up on the hi-hats. I would say that for ballads, I play heel down on the hi-hats, if I play the hi-hat at all. Most of the time it would be a volume concern, because like heel up, especially on really low volumes, even heel up with the left foot can add too much of a chick. So I'll play heel down when I'm playing ballads and things like that. But generally speaking, if I'm playing more aggressive music, it's heel up, getting the loudest chick I can get and making it sound good,
Yeah, and I agree there. It feels like the constraint with the hats for most jazz is bringing out the check. We're not usually trying to decrease the volume. We're trying to make it good and solid and with a good articulation, and also making sure you hold them down so that they don't make a ghost sound when they open. And it feels like that's prohibitively difficult with heel down, particularly when you're playing loud and fast.
Yeah, I think you probably learned like the heel, like 1, 2, 3, 4, the heel rocking, like thing that everybody gets taught at first, So that if you do that right, that ends up being kind of heel up, right? And it creates that chick. Yeah. And so it's more about the articulation of the hi-hats, like you said, right?
Yeah. Well, let's segue into some trade-offs. What do you think the biggest pitfalls or potentials for bad things people need to be aware of if they're experimenting with heel down?
I don't think there's anything bad necessarily. I think it's, like if you find that your bass drum isn't loud enough, then, switch your technique. If you find that you're getting hurt with the shin splints, or like your muscles just aren't developing, or if it just is fatiguing to play, then, adjust your seat height and adjust, like everybody's different. Everybody's built a little different. So adjust how far back you're sitting or how high up you're sitting, and that might help you get through it. When I teach feathering to my students, I always say, like, don't let the beater go beyond the edge of the hoop. And if you let the beater go beyond the edge of the hoop, now you've got too much articulation, right? So the front of the beater, right? Because I'm really trying to make it so it's really felt, not heard. Like it's very, very quiet when I try and feather correctly.
The distance away from the drum. So the hoop protrudes from where the head is by whatever, half an inch. And so that's just a mnemonic for them to keep the beater within a very close distance. Got it.
Exactly, yeah. And it's an easy guide. I mean, obviously you don't have to follow that. In fact, if you were feathering that quietly in the big band era, you get kicked out of the band. They wanted to hear boom, 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 So again, but that's just, I have students that they come up to me every once in a while that are like, my band director doesn't really like it when I'm feathering. I'm like, it's because you're not feathering. If you were feathering, your band director wouldn't know you were feathering. What? So, and that's just a really great way to kind of get them to understand, like, you're barely hitting the thing. And so for me, and this is where I have a question for you too. So like, I want to know how you do that heel up, For me, I have to be heel down to be able to do that. There's just no other way.
Well, this is where we come into the trade-offs. Because I think heel down optimizes for easy soft dynamics and probably nice touch at soft dynamics, and also allows, and correct me if I'm wrong, you to use a little bit lower spring tension, so there's just less tension in the system in general. So you can sort of feel like you can, like a painter, you can just sort of lay it on there. And I feel like heel up excels at power and speed and, and versatility when you can't always control the distance between the thrown and the kick drum, and also cross-genre versatility, meaning sort of like I now play exclusively matched grip except for brushes. Because I do so much cross-genre stuff, I wanted one technique that would be suited to everything. But just as you need to mitigate against shin splints and perhaps switching to an alternate technique if you need to develop a lot of volume with heel down, and you kind of have to be careful about your setup and your distance from the kick drum. With heel up, it is a challenge to get the lower part of that dynamic range. So the tax you pay, in my opinion, is practicing a lot of stuff softly. So that when I was on my sort of Greg Hutchinson inspired feather mission, because it was the first time I'd really shed feathering since I was playing heel down in college. And I was, just on a mission to do it in earnest. So there was a lot of practice with doing something like you described with your students, keeping the distance between the beater and the drum head really slight. I remember John Riley telling me, just worry about getting it in time first, and then worry about making it soft. So I spent a few days just playing it in time and not worrying about the dynamics, and then gradually bringing it down. So I guess the other thing is it's a lot more finicky when it comes to setup, because if people do heel up wrong, then they're going to report tension in their hip flexors because they're using their whole leg, they're using their hip flexors to lift their whole leg rather than pressing off through the ball of their feet. And also, it's harder to avoid planting the beater, and it's a more delicate dance of setup and technique. The spring tension needs to be in the exact right window, et cetera, et cetera. So those are what I would say are the major trade-offs for heel up.
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, I don't really worry about spring tension. I play like DW 9000 pedals, and I take them out of the box and just put their accelerator thing on in the chain, and then I'm done.
It's the nice thing about DWs, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always been like that. Yeah. I have one that's like 20-something years old that developed a squeak, and I was like, I'll just get a new one. And the new one, I thought actually, you know what? I got a Yamaha pedal with a direct drive and everything, and I was like, oh man, this thing's gonna be sick. I can't wait to do it. And I could not play. It's the only pedal that I just couldn't do it. It didn't work for me. And it was a fantastic pedal. It was just amazing. It was fully adjustable, and I just it wouldn't work. And so I went back to a DW 9000, got a brand new one, and just did exactly that. Put the little accelerator thing up, and then I was on it. And so I honestly have no idea what my spring tension is, which is funny. And I don't think it would be any different if I was playing heel up. I remember not really caring that much about speed or spring tension, which maybe I always know that like when I was a kid and adjusting spring tension, that's when I messed up my pedal. So.
Yeah, I feel like whatever DW does, they've got some mechanism where it's just less spring tension sensitive. I worry about that less just because I had to kind of become a spring tension wonk. So I sort of feel like maybe one secret superpower from all the years of coffee shop gigs on house kits and going into shared practice studios, either in New York or on the road, is I feel like whatever the pedal, I can kind of get it dialed in to the window pretty quickly. But you're absolutely right. Shout outs DW. When there's a DW pedal on the kit, it seems like there's very little adjustment necessary. I wanted to pivot into some other aspects of teaching, though. Are you still teaching as a pretty big component of what you do day to day, or is it less now?
I'm actually trying to build it up more even. I'm tired of being away from my family, on gigs and really just trying to get babysitters. And, it's a lot of hassle. I started, gigs sometimes don't pay that much. And I remember like a couple of times I'll play a gig for $160 or something, and the babysitter gets 100 of that, and I'm just like, what am I doing here? What's the point? So I'm becoming a lot more selective about the gigs that I play. I play with the symphonies and some of the bigger things still, but not tiny little gigs. Not to say that I won't take them, but most of the time, if it doesn't land perfectly, then I'm not gonna. It's too much hassle, right? So I'm actually building my teaching. You had an amazing video on teaching maybe a couple years ago. It was what do you do as a private teacher, or should everybody teach, or something like that. I can't remember what it was.
But interesting.
It was a really great video where you talked about the natural evolution of a teacher, which is where you talked about teaching one-on-one, then going to group lessons, and then something else like online courses or something like that. I forget exactly what the path was. So I've been one-on-one teaching now and I just figured that out, 30 years. I'm counting the years that I taught in high school, So yeah, it's been a long time, and I've started a kind of a group teaching program, mentorship program that's finally going along. And so what I'm really trying to do at this point is build that up and get that happening. And I've found that it's in such a great way, a better way of teaching. It's all online, and it's just become such a cool thing because I can teach these lessons via video. And then we have live group lessons a couple times a week. And instead of me teaching the same lesson to 100 different people at 100 different times, I can teach the same lesson to 100 different people at exactly the same time. And then we can tweak and answer questions together and have one-on-one interactions via Zoom and everything. So it's turned out to be a lot better, I think. And I think it's an amazing teaching model. And the pandemic, I think, really opened that up for a lot of people too. So.
Yeah, that's actually a great spot to dive deeper, because I feel like the major insight, so tell me if you have this experience, but sometimes younger drummers will ask me, how do I get more students, or how do I build a career, etc. And very often it feels like the central insight that's missing is that if you're doing it in person, number one, you're tied to a local economy. So you have to get paid whatever people are willing to pay in the local economy. And number two, you're limited to that pool of students. So if you want to curate for a certain genre of students, or there's no nice way to say this, a higher quality, then you might have a limited pool of people to choose from. I think maybe more and more people are getting hip to the fact that it can be done remotely. And I think what you just said is exactly the way. It's exactly what I do as well, where you have recorded video content that can deliver the message for you. And then you just do like a group lecture / Q&A. And it's basically the college model.
Yeah.
It's the professor didn't write a different textbook for every single student. You had the course curriculum, and then they lectured on it, and you asked questions, right?
It's perfect.
My major question would be, does anything come to mind as the major thing you would say to someone who's just getting started teaching? They're maybe doing the storefront music store thing and not super satisfied with the quality of students, maybe think they don't like teaching. Does anything come to mind in terms of mindset and like next steps you'd advise that person to take to improve their relationship with it?
Yeah, I do, and this is something that took me a long time to realize. And as a teacher, I think everybody needs to realize this. It'll make your life so much better. It's this one simple truth, and that is not every student is going to be a professional musician. Not every student is going to take this as seriously as you did. You obviously, as a teacher, are somebody that has put a lot of dedication and life into music. Some people are just doing this because it's an activity. And especially now that I have small children, I understand why parents would just drop them off for a half an hour so they can go get a coffee. Like they're cool. You're the babysitter in a way, So as long as you can still engage with that student and give them a quality, or at least attempt to give them some sort of quality interaction and, some sort of musical development, and not be so concerned if they practice week to week, and not hold your own personal value on that particular aspect, then you're cool. And just know that you're going to have really great students too. And you'll get really great students in that retail storefront. It's just that you're going to get one for every 30 that you get. I call them retail students, so in the storefront. And that's what people are. And like, if people call me and say, hey, yeah, what are your rates for drum lessons? And instantly I know that they're not my students, because, most people come to me and they say, all right, Tim, I want to take lessons from you, and it's like, okay, well, this is my rate. And that way I weed out a lot of that instantly. I don't even advertise anymore on locally for local students. Most of that actually just comes from referrals and word of mouth stuff at this point. But for somebody that's just starting out, that one mindset is such a really important thing to have, and that will help you become a better teacher. The other thing that you need to do is just stick it out. Find a space that you can eventually teach out of and move your students, or get some students, as long as you haven't signed a non-compete clause or something like that. Find a space where you can teach out of that's comfortable for you and for your students, and start trying to do it on your own as quickly as possible, because the retail storefronts are difficult, and they can take a lot of money from you. So, that's it.
Another interesting aspect of your story is that you sort of got into YouTube at a good time and built up enough of a brand that you have students coming in, but it's clear that you're able to sort of sustain that throughput without constantly doing YouTube. Like, you're on the socials, you do stuff intermittently, but was there a trick or a secret to getting a flywheel going where you could turn your attention to other things rather than just constantly feeding the content machine, asking for a friend?
I guess I've been really lucky in that I have really good relationships with the band directors in this area at the best schools. And so I've been able to, and I've given them really great results for their students. And pretty much I have two of the top schools in this area that basically funnel students to me when they need it. And that's been really great. SEO was really, really good for me in the early 2000s. I figured out pretty early on, even before Mike did, how to say Sacramento drum lessons, and I had a website set up for all that, and it really worked. I was getting people left and right, and then I did a little bit of marketing at Guitar Center early on too, where I just would go in and buy the guys behind the counter a pizza and say, hey, send me some students, and they would gladly do that, and then I'd buy them another pizza after I got another student from them, and just basic marketing things with that helped a lot. And then I just built a reputation at this point now, where locally at least the people understand what's going on. And then the beauty is that the YouTube videos seem to last for a long time, right? So there's something that sticks around and people are still finding it. I think my stupid that soloing with rolls video was not meant to do what it did. Like, it bugs me to death that is the one. I think I referenced the weekend, or the situation, Mike the Situation from Jersey Shore. Like, why that one, people? So anyway, that video obviously took off, and people still find me through that, and I get a lot of, and my other videos, of course, and I get a lot of people asking me about drum lessons through that, and it's really helped. And soon, I'm sure you guys have all seen like the ads from people, but you'll be seeing some ads from me, because I'm trying to really start building up this group lesson thing. So I'm likely going to be doing more content in the future just to help develop this my group teaching program. So
yeah, you never get to choose what goes viral, do you?
No.
A lot of the videos I would have chosen are the ones that got the fewest views. Just things I poured my heart and soul into. I just felt like they were beautiful works of film, and then they got like 2,000 views. And then very often it's something that I'm embarrassed by now that got a ton.
Yeah, I would like to. I've been following you for a while, Nate. So early on, I remember you were doing some vlog style videos that were really cool. I enjoyed those, and I enjoyed your. I've watched your trajectory into like you're really great at the drum thing, but also like you really are into the editing and like making the videos entertaining. I'd say like when there was a shift in your videos too, a number of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago now, where you went from purely teaching to more storytelling. And as soon as you did that, your channel just went whoosh, and it was awesome to see.
For a minute until the pandemic, and then the algorithm changed, and then it came crashing back to earth. But baby steps. I think now it's growing in a more sustained, knock on wood, less viral way. So I'm very happy for that. One more question for you on teaching, and this has been top of mind since maybe last summer, but how do you know if you're good enough to teach?
Yeah,
who should teach?
That was definitely in your, I think, that teaching video that you did, right? It was something like that. You made that video, and that's a great question, right? Like, one of the answers that I give to that is that when I first started teaching, I got really nervous because I was like, wait a second. I'm affecting the trajectory of these people's lives, and like, this person could become a famous drummer or like wants to be a musician, and I did that to them, and like oh no, what am I doing? I want to make sure that their technique is cool. What if they go to this other drummer and their technique isn't cool? And I think the real question is more so like, are you still able to be a student? Are you still flexible? Are you good at explaining things to people in a way that helps them understand? And if they don't understand, are you able to then explain it in another way so that they will understand it? And you don't have to be the best player in the world to be the best teacher in the world. I tell my students this a lot of times. I'm like, my goal is to not make you good. My goal is to make you better than me, so that you can go on and do whatever you want to do. And that's been really great, a great philosophy for teaching my students. And another thing that I tell my more advanced students, obviously if you're a beginner and you just picked up drumsticks, please don't teach. But once you have a number of years under your belt and you've been doing this for a while, one of the things that I love telling my students is like, you need to get some students so that you can really internalize this material. Start teaching the same things and have a mentor for teaching. I was lucky. My mom was an elementary school music teacher, and so I would ask her questions all the time, and she had really great insight about teaching and doing things like that. So she was my mentor, and I offer that to my students where I tell them instantly, like, if you start teaching, if you need anything, just let me know. You're my student. I want to make sure that you're getting what you need from this, and that your students are also getting what they need from your teaching. So I guess the real answer is like, maybe your teacher will tell you that it's time for you to start teaching. And, if you're concerned at all about being a good teacher, you're going to be fine. If you're doing it to collect a paycheck, don't teach. Don't teach.
That's a big one, because there were sort of two eras for me. One was the sort of storefront right out of music school when I'm just like, I need to do anything to make a living. And then coming back into it later on, it's a completely different animal, and it's night and day. This has been amazing. I really, really appreciate your time. Where would you send people to check out what you've got going on in the unlikely event they're not already following you?
That's awesome, Nate. It has been an absolute pleasure. TimMetz.com is a great place. My YouTube and Instagram are also there. I don't TikTok. I don't Twitter or X or whatever it is. So like, I'm pretty much, I'm like the Xennial, like you wouldn't believe. I definitely embrace some technology, but not others, right? I'm 77, baby. I'm right in there. I am the people that I'm the most dangerous. I can float both ways. So, but yeah, YouTube, my website, and Instagram are my main things. So.
Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We should do it again sometime, but really, really appreciate you being a good sport about the heel up, heel down thing. I hope people will get a lot out of that and realize that it's not one or the other, but that synthesis. But yeah, really, really awesome chatting, and hope to speak to you soon.
Let's do it. Let's do a traditional versus match next time.
Oh, heck yeah. All right, man. Have a good one. Speak to you later.
You too, Nate. Take care. Thank you.